Lord Hermer was in trouble last week, and he continues to be in trouble over the weekend. And it seems to have got worse, combining the backlash from the Nazi comparison with the political fallout over his links to the Lucy Connelly prosecution. And this is a serious political as well as a legal dilemma that is engulfing Richard Hermer, KC, the Attorney General in Keir Starmer's government. And his missteps have turned what was meant to be a quiet, principled office into a lightning rod for controversy. This twin embroilment, first the ill-judged historical analogy involving Carl Schmitt and Nazi-era jurisprudence. Again, as I pointed out the other day, perfectly reasonable observation, but ill defined. And second, his authorization of the prosecution of Lucy Connelly now risks undermining not only his credibility, but the broader legal integrity of his administration. But beginning with the Schmidian gaffe, in the speech defending international law, Lord Hermer warned that those who advocate abandoning the European Union on human rights are echoing the legal realism of 1930s Nazi jurists, in particular Carl Schmitt, Hitler's so-called crown jurist. Now, academically, Hermer isn't wrong. Schmitt argued that sovereignty lay outside the law and that the law was subservient to the will of the state, and Hermer rightly views this worldview as a philosophical prelude to tyranny. But politically, the comparison is calamitous. To liken elected MPs, however misguided, to proto-Nazis is not only inflammatory, but strategically unwise. It alienates potential allies and hands rhetorical ammunition to his opponents. Farage and Badenoch, never slow to cry foul, seized the moment, and Hermer apologised for his clumsy reference, a euphemism if ever there was one, but the damage was done. In the culture war cauldron, Godwin's law is not a legal principle but a political death trap. And now comes something far more tangible, your Lord Hermer's authorization of the prosecution of Lucy Connelly. Connelly, the wife of a Conservative councillor, was jailed for 31 months after pleading guilty to inciting racial hatred in a post following the Southport killings. Her tweet was vile, incendiary, xenophobic and dangerous, calling for migrant hotels to be burned. Yet critics, including the former Attorney General Suella Braverman, and even centrist voices argue the sentence is grossly disproportionate. They note that violent offenders often receive lighter terms and that Hermer, who had discretion to block the prosecution, allowed it to proceed. This has created a endangering narrative that the Attorney General will greenlight lengthy jail time for speech, however abhorrent, while thousands of serious criminals are released early because of overcrowding in prisons. This is a perception of two-tier justice that has taken root, and it fuels the policies or the political rants of Farage and Reform, one standard for violent crime, another for political speech. Hermer insists that the CPS made the charging decision and the judiciary imposed the sentence, but it also is true that this specific offence, incitement to racial hatred, requires his explicit consent, and he gave it. The result, a furore that plays into the hands of Labour's enemies. Reform UK, the Conservatives and free speech campaigners have united unusually to condemn what they call political lawfare. Badenoch has called Hermer's judgment a national embarrassment. Farage accuses him of representing the cabal of out-of-touch human rights lawyers, and even some Labour benchers are uneasy, noting the optics of prosecuting a tweet while simultaneously calling for rehabilitation and reform elsewhere in the justice system. I would say this entire argument is misgrounded. The real contrast is between the mercy shown to Mike Amesbury and the indifference shown to Lucy Connelly. That is the real contrast. And that, incidentally, would absolve Hermer of his involvement. This controversy intersects with deeper political anxieties. Hermer is one of Starmer's closest friends, a trusted legal brain, perhaps, but now a liability in the optics war of post-Brexit Britain. He is unelected, unfiltered, unafraid to speak with doctrinal clarity, but this clarity is now collided with the murk of populist politics. So where does this leave Lord Hermer? In some ways, he's a symbol of Labour's principled legalism, a man who believes profoundly in international law, constitutional restraint, and the dignity of legal institutions. But in politics, principle must walk alongside perception. And right now, the perception is of a lawyer adrift in a world of political minefields whose admirable convictions have led him straight into public mistrust. Unless the Prime Minister intervenes, Hermer will remain for now. But if another error follows, or if Connelly's case gathers momentum as a symbol of free speech and justice, it may become a sacrifice Starmer cannot afford not to make. Starmer may be forced to concede, and on these spurious grounds, on the wrong grounds, Lucy Connelly will be released. And this is the absurdity of it all. Lucy Connelly should not be a figurehead for free speech. Free speech comes with responsibility. Lucy Connelly demonstrates she has none. But the Mike Amesbury leniency demonstrates clemency to people who have touched power, to people with political connections, which is then refused to people without those political connections at that level. Is this some sort of Masonic plot, or is this some sort of nod, wink, wink thing about people in the House of Commons who get preferential treatment to people who otherwise are just married to a Conservative councillor? The lesson perhaps is as old as politics itself. Law without political judgment is dangerous. Law without mercy is dangerous. Law with selective mercy is dangerous. Law, and I hope to deal with this a little bit later, law that involves paperwork that seems to have been, doctored, is dangerous. Being able to prove it, even if that proof lies in another case, that is the importance. We are in a position in the UK at the moment where the law is being torn to pieces by very dodgy behaviour and by political obsessions. Either the law is being disregarded or the law is being twisted. But either way, the law is not as blind and as uniform as it should be. Nor is it as listening. The law should be prepared to listen to individuals. The law should be such that justice is delivered and sentences are delivered according to the individual, not according to the crime. Of course, crime has some bearing on the sentence, but the punishment of one person may not necessarily be appropriate for another. And that was a principle in British justice until very recently. And suddenly we've got a sort of box-ticking system which comes very close to what W.S. Gilbert described in The Mikado. He was writing a satirical song, Let the Punishment Fit the Crime. It's actually become a recipe for reality. That is very worrying. And the law without judgment is dangerous. The law without political judgment is dangerous. And political judgment without restraint is chaos. And we need both. And we must demand both from those who speak and prosecute in our name.